Hello, everybody. Well, welcome to Jasper's Lab, the show where I'm serious about, at least about preparations for role-playing games and specifically Dungeons and Dragons. Although, as I think it says somewhere in a description, it can be applied to many things because, I really don't talk about statistics that much, for example, more about how you prepare for new players, how you prepare for a dungeon, how you combine backgrounds and that kind of stuff. And that can be, you can do that with every system, at least if the system allows for you to create those things. For example, we had a great Call of Cthulhu one-shot, and I approached that character creation the same as I do Dungeons and Dragons, although the system is totally different. There are just all these other skills that support the same thing. Getting off track already. Let's first do some quick socials. They can be viewed under !socials. We've got our Instagram, we've got our Twitter. Yeah, we've got Twitter. We've got our Discord, which is great. Please join our community. It's fun. It's not that busy, but it's to the point and it's excellent. And we have our Twitch and our YouTube. You're watching Twitch or YouTube right now, probably. And thank you for that. Subscribe, follow, do everything you want. It helps us greatly. And if you are watching this show and you want to make a clip, that will be appreciated as well. And please leave a comment on our YouTube video, because we like to know what you think of our shows, and so we can improve. Or if you think we are too good, then we can tone it down a bit. So that's about everything I have to tell you about the socials. The other thing is our other shows. So next Monday we'll have another Parallel Projections, by which we will be joined by Lady Q and Shanks, DM Shanks from Top Down Tabletop for our one-shot Vampire the Masquerade thing. Which is the thing we do now on Parallel Projections. That's at 8:30 Central European Time. And of course, Ashley will be there as well, as the game master and our favorite Brit, so to say. And then we have Michel and Eric from the Voidcast joining us as probably vampires. But who knows, right? Then the Tuesday after that is another Talking Void, and I will be joined by Jin, which will probably be a long episode again, and we'll be talking about the homebrew rule. I called it glass feature yesterday, that broke or made your game, so to say. I will be posting the question everywhere on social, so you'll be seeing that. And then the Monday after that is the Precipice of Dreams again at 8:30, and where we will be doing the second session in the new arc, so to say, episode 31, but arc 2 of the adventure. We're still on our way to Brentwick. We've been on our way to Brentwick for a year, but we have had all kinds of shenanigans along the way. So if you want to see characters develop, want to have a laugh, sometimes a tear will be dripping from your face, that's the show for you. Occultists, yeah. Oh, cool. Oh my god, occultists, says Michel. Yeah, so we met some occultists. Want to know what that's about? Just watch the show. Okay, and that's all I have to say about that. So let's go into the intro. And that was our cool intro. So welcome back. On the previous 3 episodes, I've discussed my homebrew campaign. A Dramour Mystery is what it's called, or the adventure is called. Well, it's both a campaign and an adventure, I guess. I've discussed how I prepare for that adventure, because I suddenly realized after doing a couple of episodes that although it is good to start off easy, it's also very cool to do complicated stuff. And I'm good at complicated stuff, so why not share that with you? Although many of the things I will be telling you can be applied to beginner DMs, I hope there's something in it for more advanced DMs. Can I call myself an advanced DM? I don't know. But I have been doing it for 28 years on and off. more on than off, actually. And I think I have some grasp on the content and how to make my players enjoy themselves around the table. So my adventure is called a Dramour Mystery, and Dramour, where the mystery is taking place, is a city. And I started this adventure off with a one-shot that started in an inn in that city. The Last Battle is what the inn was called. From there on, I put my players through all kinds of weird stuff, and they made it weird sometimes. But that's what we're going to talk about today. Well, not about making it weird. We're going to talk about how you can do things in a city, how to not prepare too much, and how to stay mindful of your players' wants, so to say. I will not be going into detail of how I keep every specific character at the table interested in what's going on, because this is part of the adventure that's more focused on some players instead of all of them. But of course, that has to do with backgrounds, actually. But of course, every player should enjoy him or themselves at the table. Still have to get used to that. Hey-ho! Not to be confused with the occultists. Occultists. Yeah, don't confuse them with that. And there we have our current Dungeon Master for the Precipice of Dreams. So welcome to the chat. City adventuring. What's it all about? I made a kind of a slide so I can guide you through some topics that I think are part of what adventuring in the city means. But at the same time, it's not the full list of the things that you do. So I will add to it when the topics come up. Please ask me questions. I like you to ask questions or add to it from your own experiences, for example, so we can think of stuff to add together. Right? So here it is. Adventuring in the city. The thing is, my party left the city and came back to the city. That's kind of a different thing than your first session that will ever happen in the city. But it's great for this show because now I can talk about, give you examples of how you can actually interest them in stuff that happened in previous sessions that you can bring back to the table in your new sessions. So I recently saw on Twitter something about that most campaigns lasted, or the average campaign, I think, lasts about 6 sessions, which is I don't know how to feel about that. Because my one-shots last 3 sessions. So I think that's really short. But I think that I can easily have an arc of an adventure take place in only one city. And that would last at least 6 sessions. Not recently anymore, but like a year ago, I had a session. I had 5 sessions that just prepared for talking to the big bad boss, and it didn't even end in the fight. So, some players handle things differently than others, and or dungeon masters, and I try to keep this in mind when I talk about these things. But you must realize that it's also up to the players, and my players really like to do some role-playing in between their fights, so to say. They like to do a lot of role-playing and a lot of planning, and this makes for quite long sessions. I often play about 4 to 5 hours on an evening, depending on how late we start and if I have something to do on the next day. And in that time, I almost never have more than 1 combat. The rest is role-playing, and combat can last anywhere between 5 minutes and 2.5, maybe 3 hours, depending on the complexity. So when my players came to... Hey, hello, Eric. Oh my god, it is the voidcast live Jasper. Yeah, it's me. Okay, you're a funny guy. Anyway, so in my case, my adventurers left the city because they fled from the Master of Coins, who is this bastard who had a price of 2,000 golds standing on. Well, he claimed that the cleric of the party had a debt with him of 2,000 gold pieces. And so they thought, well, we don't have 2,000 gold pieces, let's flee the city. And at the same time, we have this cool quest that we can go on, which I discussed in the previous episode. And to get some more background, you can watch all the episodes. Oh, nice, the city adventuring episode. Yeah, that's this one. They left the city and then... I don't have it here, I think. So I had prepared for a totally different part of the adventure after this first quest, because I thought they don't have the 2000 GP yet. They will probably want to discover some other facts about one of the characters, or maybe even 2 or 3 of the characters. And so I had prepared a kind of another dungeon, or in this case, a Dwarven City, for them to explore at level 4. And instead, they said, "No, let's go back. We'll go incognito. In disguise. We will use spells to disguise ourselves." I think they were like 4th level by then. And we'll try to see how we can handle this stuff. And so instead of preparing the dungeon, it was at the end of a session, so that was great. And instead of the dungeon, I had to prepare for a city adventure. Now, and here is what we need to do when we see our characters going a different way, and in this case, back to the city. So to start, we have to know, what is the adventurer's goal? What do the adventurers love? And who do they know? Let me explain, because the goal is quite obvious. The goal is that they want to confront or do something with the Master of Coins, so that they don't have to pay their debt. They think it's ridiculous that the clerk has to pay a debt worth 2,000 gold pieces just because he gambled when he was younger and never and got taken from the streets by the clergy and became a priest. 2,000 gold pieces is way too much. That's kind of the thing they are telling themselves. There are some individual goals, so I said it's about a couple of the characters are important in this arc. It's the cleric, of course, because he has the confrontation. He has to have the confrontation with this Master of Coins. But then we also have Findal, the rogue from the party, who left this city because his parents got murdered by the underground organization. We have the sorcerer, who has some bonds with currently active other underground organization named the Amari, which is kind of his family inheritance kind of guild. So there's that, and those are the main characters who will have their story develop on a personal level. So we also have the monk, who did have a kind of side adventure that I have not discussed. I will not discuss everything in between this session, so I gave him some personal thing that developed his story. We have the ranger who got his animal companion. We have the barbarian who's more interested in other stuff than the city, but tags along. And we have the paladin, the dwarven paladin, the Dwergar paladin, whose storyline keeps developing just a bit because he is getting less grip on the fact that he's a Dwergar, and he appears as a mountain dwarf, and he's slowly starting to gain some features that are Dwergar associated, like going invisible or enlarging himself. And his skin sometimes turns gray. Those are the things that are happening in the background. What is the goal? It's the Master of Coins, but then at the same time you have the rogue his goal, which is to well, it's not actually, well, the goal is to stay hidden somewhat, but it is interesting for him to find allies within other factions in the city, so he can start building building up some reliable resources that can help him confront his big bad, so to say, in the future. And then I wanted to keep it interesting for the sorcerer because he knows some people there that might meet him during that stage. But the main thing is, of course, the cleric who has this gambling habit and wants to confront the Master of Coins, and all the other characters are helping him. So be sure that you know the goal the party has when they enter a city. Getting into the why later. Then the other thing is, what do the adventurers love? And this is quite important. If you watch a lot of Critical Role, then every time they enter a city, they have to shop, especially when they have some new loot or coins or whatever. They are going on a shopping spree. But it can be anything. It can be visiting inns. It can be burgling. It can be going to a temple. It can be those kinds of things actually. And a lot of variety. There's a lot of variety to what they love to do in a city or anywhere, but the city. I have these two characters who always try to burgle something, and that will end up costing one of the player characters his father's life in the future. But we'll get to that in a later episode. And then the other thing is, who do they know? And this is quite important as well. If you have a new party that never went to the city, they might have a contact in the city, or they might know of a name, or someone went in front of them to go to the city, and they might try to visit this person, or they simply do not know anybody, and they just know they have to go to some place in the city to start something, or maybe it's just them entering the city and going to the inn. Why is this important? Because you want to make a city a lively place. So if you forget the people they met on the previous visit to the city, it might be the case that they think that the city is stagnant. The non-playing characters don't matter if you don't introduce them again, or it becomes, holy crap, it's Bowen. What are you talking about? And Altleaf. What? What is Eric saying? I have no idea. Anyway, yeah. Okay, got confused by chat. Sorry. Sorry, I see the character cards. Oh yeah, finally. So you don't have to introduce every character that they met, and it's possible you only created one significant character anyway. You don't have to create a lot of characters to make the city interesting. But for the progression of time to have happened, if they have already visited the city, it's always great to have a conversation with someone who will be saying what's happened in between now and then. So that's why I put these things at the top. Knowing what the goal is, knowing what the characters love to do anywhere, really, and who they already know in the city. Now, in a way, who they already know in the city is the easiest part to manage when you do an adventure in the city, because you only have to get the prep work for your previous session. And this might be a name written down, like, for example, with me, it was a guard named Carrick, who was kind of the... well, he wasn't the captain of the guard, but he had a good rank, and they had a lot of conversations with him about the stuff that was happening in the city. And so he was an important character to them. So I kept him in mind. I kept this guy, Rosse Johnny, who was this kind of drunk in one of the other inns in the harbor area. I kept him on hand to sell them expensive potions, healing potions, and he was kind of a friend. And then, the bartender and her husband as well, in that same inn. And then you have the innkeeper of the other inn, and then they know this woman that's up the street, for which they saved her husband from being a zombie for too long by killing the zombie, by the way. And they knew a couple of prominent figures in the city because they got kind of awarded for bringing to the light that there was something happening underground with vaults full of zombies and stuff. So those are the characters they already know. So I don't have to do anything about those characters. I have them written down. The thing I often do is I either use 1, 2, or 3 rules on a page. And the first one is the name of the character. The second one is if it's the gender, the class, and the race, and the level. And then the third rule is some part about the biography or a feature that defines the character. And then if they are more important characters, I write them down in a couple of lines in the characters, in the kind of adventure synopsis that I have, which I showed like 2 episodes before this one, especially for the big bad. So that's kind of easy because you should already have these characters in mind, even though they might not be developed that much. Then what they love is also kind of easy, because if they always try to visit the temple, then it's okay. You can simply flesh out the temple a bit more, or you can say if you've forgotten details, let them talk about the details and just say you return to your temple, you remember this place, and blah blah blah. My characters also like to do shopping, especially for magic items, even though they never have the gold to do it. Well, they had the last time. So I built some magic shops in the city, gave them a name, said who the proprietor is, what kind of magical items they have, which they have on stock, which they have in a vault, which they can order, and that kind of stuff. I have the Scroll Potion and the Arcane Vellum. Those are the 2 main ones. And then I have one that's underground, of which I now forgot the name. And one is run by a gift, the other by a gnome, and that kind of stuff. You can prepare those quite easily, and you don't have to make extensive lists about the magical items that are there, although I do that lately. I've never done that before, but I've done that for this adventure. But you can simply think of the kinds of magical items that such proprietor would have in store, and it is quite easy to describe magical items that are far out of reach to them and just tell them that they are far out of reach, like a beautiful piece of armor, a beautiful sword, not go into details when it's not the right time to do so. But you can talk about them, about magical scrolls or a lesser item or healing potions, because those are always the things they really want. So that's how you can kind of do these things. But then you have to also prepare for the main goal, and that's the bulk of the preparation. So as I said, for me, it takes a couple of sessions to go through part of a story arc. So I don't have to prepare everything at the first session. I can see how things would likely progress. And you can also extend the time that they stay at a certain place. Not to delay the inevitable, but to make stuff more interesting. Because it's stupid just to prolong the experience when it's not fun. You have to make it interesting in another way when you do that. Someone says, do your characters always remain stationary in your city, or do they move around, and are they even encountered outside the city? In other cities, for instance, on business trip? Your non-playing characters, I think. That's an interesting thing. So, very nice question. Thank you. They are not stationary. And they also level up, and they do all kinds of stuff in between. But you don't have to. But that's. Well, let's talk about the city. I think that's important. So stuff is happening in the city, and it happens if the characters are there or not. And most things might be minor, because why do cool things when the players are not there, for example? Although some things might be considered cool and you're still doing them while they are away. But yeah, stuff happens. And so especially when your characters have, for example, stumbled on the big plot of the adventure, and the big bad is trying to clean up after himself. Some people might disappear, or some calamity might happen. All these kinds of things can happen while the characters are away. Don't forget that they didn't try to confront the Master of Coins, for example, in my adventure. When they were first there, they decided to flee the city or go on a quest. It's like, we're not fleeing, we're just advancing in reverse, that kind of feeling. And they felt that they weren't up to the task. They might have been right, but it all depends on what you want to do about it. So that the Master of Coins did react to the fact that they left the city, because actually she didn't like it, because she wanted to have that 2,000 gold pieces. No, they aren't stagnant. They can travel to other cities. It depends on what the climate is telling them to do. If it's so let's go to my city. I think I have to this one. So this is Dramour. Last week I had carefully planned pictures, but as you can see, I've got a couple of pages lying here, and most of them were too big for my scanner. So I thought this would be the way to do it, and then I can actually point at stuff that's happening. I hope it's sharp enough on camera. Let me see on the Twitchy. Yeah, I think it is, right? Can't read anything, but it's the city of Dramour that's written in the upper right corner. And I really like this map. I drew it in a couple of hours, really quickly. And it's a city that lies at the coast, the Great Sea, because why not call it the Great Sea, right? It's got a harbor right here. It's got this lower town with a couple of important buildings in them. Then it goes up a steep hill, and there's a graveyard there, and there's the middle town. And then there's the upper town, which is the rich part of town, and there's the big temple and the castle up there. And I think I described this already, but this city has an influx of population because the capital city kind of exploded. And so all the survivors came to this city. So it's filled up with people. The lady of the city, named Julia of Dramour, pretty easily, is the current leader because her husband exploded in the same explosion that exploded the big city, the capital city. So she's now in the lead, and she has no experience in doing that, although she's doing a great job. She has 2 kids as well, and there's this little council there. This is what I know. I haven't, at this stage, what I'm talking about, I haven't developed these characters more than this sense of who they are. And I did write down the name Julia. but nothing more than that. It's Lady Julia of Dramour. This is an example of a character that has not been developed beyond the first rule, so to say, as I described a bit earlier. So we know the city is full. We know that the guards have to stay in the city to keep everything going. We know that there might be a lot of poor people or people, desperate people and that kind of stuff. So that's what's kind of happening in the lower city. The harbor is full. Ships keep coming in. The stench is growing. The upper city doesn't like what's happening in the lower city. The middle city does like what's happening because they have all the supplies and they are selling stuff like mad. So this is kind of the thing that's happening in the city. So and that's what you have to take in account when you think about the characters that you had already had them, who they already met, is that they have a job to do. And for example, for Carrick, who is a guard, he probably went to do guard things, which is not the case because he got murdered, but that's another thing. That's a big development. Do they stay stagnant? Yeah, because he can only stay in one place at the same time right now, and that's in the grave. The innkeeper is still the innkeeper. She's not really progressing in any sort of relevant manner. Rossishoni, who's in the harbor, is well, he is developing, but not in a way that the characters might notice right away. But he is slipping into drugs right now, which will become a part of the story later on. Although I guess I didn't really know that by now at this stage. Although he was already kind of a drunk and did like to use kind of stuff. So I already set him up to be this guy who would either have a breakthrough or have a breakdown. Yeah, and then there's everything happening behind the scenes, you know. So the big bad is literally doing stuff at this moment. But there is a thing about pacing there, because the big bad is also the one who gave them their first quest, and so he kind of delayed the most relevant things he's doing in Dramour, because he wants to get to know this party because of reasons I already told you. So in my case, there's not that much happening except for the constant flow of people who come to the city and the death of Carrick, which is a thing that they will discover. So that's about the old player characters. None of them traveled outside of the city during this. There is one non-playing character that the paladin met along the way, and he thinks that she did go to the city, but she didn't. She got kind of murdered somewhere, which is a whole other story. So I think he said he might visit her, but that never came to be because, other stuff happened. But this is interesting because then if he tells you that he might visit her, you have to she isn't there, so that's not a problem. The thing is that she never got there, and that might be an interesting discussion that this paladin will be having with where she said she would be going, namely to the cloister of Paragon, which is right here, where she would birth her child. But she isn't there. So I hope that answered your question somewhat about how I handle my non-playing characters. Because now we're going to finally get into that main part of the episode, which is the end so part. Okay, so what should you prepare? What can be done later? Who's important for the session? And do I need a map? Okay, so what should you prepare? Well, the main thing is you have to be able to progress the party towards their goal. But you also have to, so you have to know what's happening there. And this is quite an interesting thing because you can't think of everything as a dungeon master. Some things you just have to make up on the spot. For example, what I found kind of complicated is that the party wanted to slip into the city unnoticed, which I can handle. That's not that big of a problem. But then they wanted to find the trail towards this Master of Coins because they didn't know. Now come the very interesting stuff. I hope so. Because I didn't know how they wanted to approach this. And it's a big city. It's got like 100,000 inhabitants or maybe more, I think. Well, by now it's a lot more. Yeah, they wanted to be sneaky about it. They wanted to investigate stuff. They wanted to get to know people below grounds and stuff for information. And so, yeah, and you never know how well prepared the player characters are themselves when they try to do that kind of stuff, especially with newer players. Well, it's not actually true. I think older players do it as well because sometimes players can get very narrow-minded and don't take a step back and look at the options you would normally have in the normal world. Like, for example, go to a police station to ask them if they have seen anything related to the Master of Coins. If they go to the previous place where they were confronted with a dagger near the heart, where it said that the cleric owed the Master of Coins 2,000 gold pieces. Or whatever. I can't come up with these things myself at this moment because, well, that's a dungeon master has the same problems as the player in a way. I do not prepare at all as a player. I just follow the rest and see where I end up. Yeah, you have those players as well. And that's I recently have been a player at the new Dungeon Masters table. And I guess I'm doing the same thing right now. I'm just taking a relaxed position at the table because I will not always be able to play, and I have an understanding with the Dungeon Master where I have a certain role to fulfill in the party, and I don't prepare that much anymore, which is something I like, but makes me want to look in the mirror as well at certain points, because then I sometimes feel like I disappoint the Dungeon Master when I don't remember what he was talking about on the previous session, which I recognize a lot in my players at the table. Not all of them, of course, and some are worse than others, or some are better than others if you want to have a glass half full. But anyway, so it's hard to prepare for all the stuff. So you have to come up with specific things. So I think the first thing that they did is that they snuck into the city. One of them went before the others because he got up early, rode his horse into town and wanted to investigate some stuff on his own. Then the others came and they of course were mad at him. Then they failed some disguise kit checks, so the innkeeper recognized them from the previous encounter, but it didn't really matter because she wasn't invested in exploiting their the mark that was put upon them. They weren't hunted or anything. They were they were being hunted by the Master of Coins, but not by any authority, so there was no problem there. But they still felt that they had to be very sneaky. And actually, this was the right mindset, because there were people after them and scanning for them to return to the city. And so they already had a kind of strange encounter at the gates. And that's a great example. So now you have to think of what did the bad guys, or the Master of Coins, is she a bad guy? I don't know. What did she do in the meantime? How does she prepare for losing 2,000 gold pieces and possibly getting it back? And I thought then she would probably have agents at the gates to see them come in. But she can't cover the whole city, so it's probably only the gates that are being guarded. So there are like 4 gates out of the city. Then you can kind of sneak into the harbor if you're smart about it. So at least all 4 gates would have someone stationed there. And some of them didn't actually exactly go into the city disguised at all. So some of them got spotted and they had a little... Well, they felt like they were being watched, but they escaped that and kind of encounter by going into the sewers. And so I did prep for the sewers. So okay, so here's the other interesting part. As and this is where your characters come into play. I have a rogue in my party, and he knows the underworld. And of course, part of the underworld lives in the sewers for some reason. It's such a fantasy trope, so you should always do that. But I was thinking, so what? And I know there are at least 3 factions in the city. It's the faction that he is running from. It's the faction that's where the other character, the sorcerer, is part of. Those are the Black Ravens and the Umari. And then I thought those can't be the only factions in the city, because Tornheim has been destroyed. That's the capital city. And so a group came from there, which is the Retters, which is another faction. And they are kind of cool. And then I thought not everybody is Black Raven and not everybody is an Umari. So there's this kind of independent faction as well. And then I thought there might also be a kind of burglar faction. So 5 factions. I made 5 factions to make the underworld interesting, so to say. And the faction they encountered in the sewers when they fled there were the Retters, because they are, Retters, the name says it all. They are mostly were-rats and some werewolves and some other were thingies. And they live in the sewers and they build their base there. And so they kind of split up the party when they entered. Not when they entered. Some of them had to split up and go another way. Some of them went into the sewers, and But then you have to think of how can you get them together again. But anyway, why did I prepare for these things? I think just because I knew that the possibility was big that they would try to explore these factions because of their connections with them. So I thought, to make the city interesting, I don't have to think about what Lady Julia is up to right now, or possibly what other factions, wizard faction or whatever, is up to. I have to think about what the relevant factions are up to, and they are kind of in this this situation where they have to rediscover what their part in the whole thing is. The Umari have gotten big in the city. The Black Ravens were always here. The Retters have come in between them, but they don't choose a side, and they are more trying to keep themselves alive and do interesting stuff in trade and stuff, and so. And then you have the in-depths who try to not be part of the faction, and then the burglars, they were kind of an optional faction that I thought was logical to have as well, but I didn't really develop them. So how do I develop these kinds of things to make them lively for the characters again? So from for the Black Ravens, I know who the boss is, namely the enemy of the rogue, because that's the most cool thing, right? Then for the Umari, it's the same. It's the father, or the supposed father of the sorcerer. Holy crap! Do you have interconnected spreadsheets to keep track of all these factions? No, I have a Word document actually. So that's what I'm going into now. So any faction, not only a kind of thief kind of faction or a criminal kind of faction, but any kind of faction you can develop by just putting some names on paper and seeing how they relate to each other. So I decided that these factions would have kind of a captain, and then some lieutenants, and then they have an idea of what they stand for. So in the case of the Black Ravens, their captain or their leader, you want to call him, is Emeritus Gond. No, Emeritus Zond. Yeah, and he's this political figure in the city who is untouchable and stuff. And then for the Umari, it's a tiefling, killer, so to say. And he's kind of the leader, I think. Can't remember exactly, but he's also the father of one of the characters. And then they have a couple of lieutenants, and the only thing I described about them is, as I said again, their name, their class, their species, their gender, and their possible level at this point in the adventure. They might level up depending on how things progress. They might also not level up, by the way. And then I thought it was interesting to make at least one in-depth rogue, because they aren't really a faction. They are just independent contractors, so to say, who might have a past with the rogue in the party. And then, of course, the Retters. And now, here's the thing about recycling. I already made the Retters for another adventure that Tornheim exploded. The adventure where that happened is where I made the Retters. And so why not recycle them? I already know how to play these characters that are in this faction. And so when they meet them, they will be very well-rounded characters. And so it will give the characters a feeling of that these are real people. But you can also apply this to other things, like the guards, for example. You have a captain of the guard, you have a couple of important figures, you might have a jailer, and you just put those names on paper. You might say if they are corrupt or not. In this case, Carrick hasn't died for no reason. Part of the guard is in the hands of the Master of Coins. But those aren't actually the ones who killed Carrick. In this case, it's the big bad evil guy who killed Carrick because he knew too much, in a way. He didn't want it to spread what this guy knew. There you have the guards. Then you have the nobility. For example, 5 prominent nobles in the city. And when they encounter a noble, you pick one from this list. And you know kind of where he lives, but not really exactly where. It might be haughty or might be friendly, a good Samaritan or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But if you write them down, then you can do it in the same way. But in this case, it might be the father or mother of the family, a couple of sons or daughters, or an uncle or something, and that might be the faction that you develop. Now, to be sure, I didn't develop the guards and I didn't develop the nobility. So those are just examples how you can do it in the same way. And really, you just have to write a few lines. Another question. How do you level these NPCs? Do you use the monster manual stat block and add HP, damage, number of attacks? Or do you use different monster like bandit to bandit, captain to assassin, etc.? Do you make full-fledged out and leveled characters? Okay, so all these characters have levels for me. They have a class, a race, and a level. These are not mere bandits, because the bandits are the ones who I don't care about. And I can always pick their statistics from a Dungeon Master Guide if I need them. I do make some custom things, like a 4th level fighter that's a Master of Coins warrior, for example, or a 4th level cleric. And I keep those statistics close to me, and I can easily change them to a 4th level cleric from another faction if I need them. But I only give real class levels to the hoi polloi, as they say in, I think, Planescape, the Planescape campaign, which is the leadership of any faction. And I don't develop these characters unless I know that I really need them. For example, Emeritus Zond, at this point, I have not developed his statistics because he's kind of out of their league, but I did write down that he's a rogue with this specialization and that kind of level. That's what I did write down. And he will not progress that fast anymore. But for example, if the characters would get an opponent that's kind of at their level and is angry at them and is trying to make his way up the ladder, then that character would probably develop at about the same rate as a non-playing character. And most of the time, when they become really relevant, I just make a character sheet for them. And you know, the character sheet I use is my own character sheet in Sheets. So yeah, that's how I do it. I never approached NPCs like that. That's a great way to create awesome NPCs. I knew I would learn something today. Well, thank you. My pleasure. Yeah, it's sometimes it's just a name, as I said. Sometimes it's two rules, and sometimes it's the third rule adds some information. And at a certain point, you either develop them in your head to the point where they are a real character and you just have to think of the stats, or you keep them on paper and every time they get to a certain place, like the city of Dramour, you pull them back out of the dust and clean them up a bit and try to think of what they might have done. Then there's one one other faction, of course, and that's the Master of Coins faction. And the Master of Coins is not really, well, it's kind of a moneylender, but the Master of Coins is not located in Dramour, which is a thing, and they don't know that. So this is where other stuff comes in. Okay, so I developed, in my example, I developed the factions that they would kind of meet. And then I also thought about the Master of Coins faction and how that would appear to them. So the Master of Coins has her emissary in the city, which is this paladin called Black Cloak. I can't come up with a search Black Cloak or something, and his wife is a powerful sorcerer and he is a paladin. And the funny thing, he's a conquest paladin, just as the paladin is from the party, and the lady is a sorcerer that's much more, and they are both is a sorcerer that's much more powerful than the sorcerer in the party. So they're both pretty powerful. Now, the first session I have in the city is that they come in, they sneak into the sewers, and they meet the first faction. And then what? Now I that makes sense. So let me first answer the thing that what can be done later. I know I don't have to develop the Black Cloaks in the first session, but because they can probably not get there in one session. So I will not be developing their backstory too much. Who's important for the session? Well, the Ratters are. So that's why I developed them. And do I need a map? Yeah, I wanted to get to that point because you don't need a map. Of course, I have the Dramour map right here. And I have a couple of other maps, which I'll show later. And this is a map that I think is very cool to have, because it kind of gives me something to show them how the city, what the city feels like. Not every street is listed in this on this map. For example, it's just an ID of the city with some important buildings giving some more body, so to say. But I don't have a sewer map of this city. I also don't have a hideout map of the place that the Ratters are at. I just know that their hideout is in the sewers, and they get directed to them. I don't even remember how that happened, but they got directions to where they were in the sewers, and they went there. They got confronted with a monster along the way. Oh yeah, this is where I have to explain something that I said earlier about delaying somewhat for the sake of the story, not of the sake for delaying itself. So in front of the entrance to the Ratter's lair, there was this, what is it called? It's not a gibbering mouther. No, an Otyugh. Classic Dungeons and Dragons monster in the sewers. He was submerged, or it was submerged in the water in front of this door, which was a thing that the Ratters like to do to keep it safe. And because the Ratters didn't actually know that they were approaching, this monster attacked them. And then the Ratters sent rats, real rats, to kind of bash on the Otyugh. And this is something that happened to him a lot, so that it would subside and not attack them anymore, so they could get to the door. I did this encounter for two reasons, or for a couple of reasons. One, it's always cool to have an encounter in a sewer, and that might be the most important reason, to just let them have that experience, that something is happening in the sewers. Two, to give them a sense of danger. Three, to give lore about the Ratters before they even entered the lair. And four, to have a subject to talk about with the Ratters. And maybe there's a little five, and that's that I wanted to give them a perspective on how big a sewer could be. And fantasy sewers are always amazingly big. I don't understand how this happens. Well, I do. You just draw a map. But I want to give them the sense of claustrophobic combat in a sewer, in a part of the sewer with a big monster that could totally kill them. So that's an encounter that I prepared. And but I didn't prepare this beforehand. I prepared it kind of on the spot. And this is where I think if you tell your characters that they approach it a crossways in some sewer tunnels, and they can go left and right, and there's a light at the left through a hatch, and there to the right there's this smell, and straight ahead it's almost clear. Then what was I going to say? Now I forgot my train of thought. Who would have imagined? That's something you can do on the spot. That's what I was going to say. You don't have to really think of why that sewer is even there or what it looks like. You just come up with the crossroads. And to the right, there's the way to the... you have to kind of decide this beforehand. Or on the spot, that to the right there's the entrance to the Ratters, for example, because otherwise it gets confusing for the players if you say, oh no, it was to the left, I totally got it wrong. And what I often do is pick a piece of paper, take a pencil, and I do not draw a map, I just draw kind of the junctions with crosses and a simple system and I mark a thing as a collapse or maybe a door or a hatch, and I do that really quickly when I'm talking to my players. And so I have to. The thing is that then I have to look at a map, which gives the players a sense of a developed area, which is kind of a trick actually, and it gives me a foothold to really think of where they must go to get to the next stage. So that's how I do these things. And then I just have the monster manual next to me. And by now I know a couple of monsters that are typical for sewers, like the Otyugh. And so I place that monster into the sewer. And then I immediately think of why it should be there. And I think, okay, this is a cool guard in front of the door of the Ratters. And then you have a whole small adventure that is significant in its own way. That's how I do little things during a session. And the encounter was dangerous, but not too dangerous because they got help as well. They made a perception check and saw something glistening at the bottom of the pool, but they never got the ring of protection that was at the bottom of it. So that's a pity. But that's cool as well. I discussed this in the previous episode. Skipping loot is okay. Not letting them find all the stuff is okay as well. First off, as a dungeon master, you can slap them later on by telling you just skip 10 magical items. And the other thing is that it's more... you can always recycle these things in other places if you really think it's important that they should get something. Earlier in my Dungeon Master career, I had big problems with this. I always thought, well, I can't just throw anything around. I have to really carefully plan where any magical item is. But then you think of all these cool magical items and you just think of who might have them if they don't ever encounter this person. Well, this person might have that item and then bam, there you go. For example, I gave my barbarian frenzied berserker, I gave him a stone that would not let him get fatigued after a rage, after a frenzy, because I think that's a silly rule, but I built it into a stone and made it special, gave it a name and made a bit of history about it, and then it became something, and that's an item that I really wanted to give that player. It's not significant in any other way, but it's for exactly that player that it's cool, and you drop it at a point where it makes sense in the lore. For example, when they see a big body lying somewhere, a dead warrior or something, and you almost feel that it's a barbarian and this one is carrying Dorian stone and that kind of stuff. So I think I even gave Eric a Dorian stone at a certain point for battle rage stuff. Anyway, so that is how you handle encounters in the meantime. But then you also have to think of. So the main plot is now developing in the back of your head. The first session, what I prepared is this going into the sewers stuff. And then possibly, but I didn't prepare for how they would actually go after the information that they needed. And then they came up with their own rules about that. And they said, we have to find the guy who printed the 2000 gold thingy. Never thought of that. Dang. Who printed that thing, And then I suddenly realized it's very logical that when you are the emissary of the Master of Coins, you are not doing this spreading of the word yourself. You have your agents for that, and you might even have somebody who helps you get your message out to mercenaries who might hunt this person down for part of the fee, for example. Then, who's the guy who would be doing that? And then, so that spurred kind of the arc that ended that session, namely that they went into the Rat's lair. For some reason, the rogue was already there and having a blast, a very good time. And the others were very impressed with the drugs that were being used, the wine that kept flowing, and the sexual innuendo that was present. But it was kind of a Y-shaped place with all kinds of tents built into the sides and all these arched pieces. And then there was this one door which led to kind of a new room, which might have been a cellar of another building, where this leader or temporary leader of the Retters was at, and they had a discussion with them about how he could help them. And he kind of, because they already had this train of thought, he gave them the option to say something about this gnome who indeed did this kind of stuff for important people who wanted things found. And so they got on the scent of the gnome. I think I ended the session there. A lot of it had happened. They had sneaked into the city. They had discussed stuff in an inn. They had encountered the first person at the entrance of the city that almost spoiled their entrance for them. They went into the sewers. They developed the idea of who they had to find. They fought the Otyugh. They came in contact with the Ratters, who had a lot of more of other things to say as well. And they finally gave them the lead to get to the next session. So that's what's happened in that session. Well, I actually said what I did not prepare. I did not prepare the Master of Coins, but I by now knew that in the next session they would probably get to know these emissaries of the Master of Coins. And so I had to develop them. So I built a paladin and a sorcerer for the next session. I thought about how these people were living in the city. They were rich people, so they lived in the upper city. They had a big house, and they had 2 children, which is a funny thing to do. And they had connections everywhere. They had a front of civilized people to them, and they and they were on a mission for the Master of Coins. I think my cat is entering. And they had this big house. That's what I knew of. Then I developed the gnome as well, who had this. It was this small gnome who had a orc wife who came to help him when things got dire. And then I went into heist mode with them in that session. And that's what I prepared. No, I didn't prepare a heist. I prepared ways for them to possibly confront this family. Namely, they could just blunder in. They could stake the house. They could ask the locals what these people were about. I kind of thought of all these kinds of things. Of course, what happened is that the house of the people was lying. Was at a can't come up with the word. Open area in the city. I can't come up with that word. Plaza, kind of plaza. And there were all these restaurants, and then they went to this luxury restaurant and they ordered food that was really good, but the bill was really high, so they tried to rob that place. So that took up part of the session as well, which totally failed. Alarm went off and everything. But was really funny to do. So actually that session consisted of that robbery, them eating at the restaurant and making plans, them confronting the gnome that put out the 2,000 gold award, or at least award for getting the clerk to the Master of Coins so he could pay his 2,000 gold fee. Describing what the house looked like and what the surroundings were and who these people actually were. That was the second session that we did. Now, and this is so much fun because they went full heist mode. They can can do anything, you know. They can really confront them. They can call on the guards and let them help them confront these people, although the guards were corrupt. They could... they actually did ask the Ratters to help them, so that's a thing. But they could just sneak into the building and maybe kill these people in their sleep if they were so inclined, or whatever. But I also said that every weekend, and the weekend was kind of 2 days away, they held a party, and if you were dressed appropriately and had an invitation, then you could get in. Oh, so much fun. And of course they went for that one. And so what I prepared, well, I just said what I prepared, not too much. And now I did prepare the big bad guys, but I did not prepare I did not prepare the map, for example, because that was... I didn't think they would get there. And if they would have gotten there, it would probably not have been in a way that a map would have been needed, and otherwise I have enough experience in maps that I could just draw some corridors and some rooms and make that the map. But so I didn't need a map again for this session. So no maps, and I love drawing maps. But for the next session, I wanted to make it special because they now knew they were going to do a heist, and so I drew them a map. I have the map here, so I'm going to show that to you. This is a battle map, and this I'll be showing you how I do this stuff, or how I sometimes do this stuff. I do something different almost every time. So let me see if I can show you the whole map. Okay, so this is the... What is this again? Oh yeah, okay. Oh man. What is this? Oh, I almost forgot about that. Okay, so this is the map of their house. Can you see it? Yeah, right. So there's the this is the gate. Here's the entrance. This is the hallway. Then you see that this part of the map has been I put yellow paper over it and can strip that away to show what's beneath. But these were the 3 areas that were open to the characters, including the kind of balcony to the garden. And because the party was all over the place, and then in the garden you also had this pond. There was this gazebo, a bit of a foresty area, and a field where they could play cricket or something. I don't know, a game. And it was all sealed in with a gate. This is the map I gave them. I also gave them this map because actually I gave them this part of the map. There's a door here that wasn't open, which is the hallway and the staircase that leads through the house. And then I gave them this map as well, which is on top of this one. And these are 2 balconies, which were very important as well. So they came up with the plan. And they came up with the plan at the end of the previous session, and that's always great because then you can kind of think about how should I handle this. They knew there were guards on the balconies. They knew there was a party going on below, and they knew there were these other storage houses at the side of this building, and so they went into the storage house to the 3rd floor, and some of them were going to take out the guards on top. Some of them were going to ignite a tree in the garden, so everybody would go outside, and then they would go and kidnap the lord of the manor and interrogate him about what was happening, because they thought he was the one who gave the gnome the task for the 2,000 gold. Well, not the 2,000. Well, you understand, to get them. And now I have to take a drop of water. Voice is getting rough. Oh, nice. Put it here. So they were going to take the guards down that were on this spot, which is great because then you have the mongoose doing stunning fist and getting them down, and they have to be quiet about it, and they have to use a rope to get here as fast as possible, and that's a big part of a heist, right? Then you have the party that went into the house to mingle with the guests, and at the right moment kidnap the lord of the manor, because I said master of coins, and for some reason people always think of men when they do that, when they think of masters, and it could be mistress, of course, but let's keep it ambiguous. And so they went into the party, and of course they messed up, because this was a guy who knew a lot about politics, who knew about Tornheim, who knew about everything, and there was this music playing. There were all these guests, and he finally approached them to say, well, to say hello and ask them who they were, because that was all okay. But then they slipped up in a couple of things they were saying. I let them made because it's always where you start doing deception and persuasion checks, of course, which is great to aid them in what they are saying. They can escape from a difficult situation with a great result, or they can use low results to establish a thing where you don't have to that you don't have to consider anymore later in the conversation, because that has become true for both the characters and the non-playing characters. Great example of this is when you think of Spider-Man Homecoming, the conversation that Peter Parker has with what's his name, the Vulture, Michael Keaton. I don't know what his name is in the series, just that it's the Vulture and Michael Keaton, because Michael Keaton is so cool. Where this conversation is happening and you establish some things with a positive role, and you don't have to think about that anymore, unless you muck up really badly and he gets to know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man and his daughter is oblivious to the thing that's happening in the car. So I always think about these situations when I do the intimidation, also intimidation checks and the deception checks and the persuasion checks, to see how everything balances out. And when it goes totally wrong, then there's no way back, so to say. And of course, this went totally wrong, but the master of the house didn't make it apparent that it went totally wrong. And then they set the garden on fire, and then he was totally triggered by what was happening. And he got pulled into the corridor, but he already had informed his wife that things were going on, and his wife had his two-handed sword, and she was a sorcerer who could cast strong spells. And then this combat erupted in the corridor, and they were really scared for their lives, because they were also fighting up there, and there were only 3 of them here, and they tried to get inside as quickly as possible, because they suddenly understood that things weren't going their way, and the Ratters escaped because they didn't want to be in the conflict. And then the assassin who had formerly stabbed the clerk in his chest with the dagger that held the 2000 GP thing also appeared, but she was kind of familiar with the sorcerer, so that came into conflict, and they all didn't know what to do. And then the door and on the second floor opened, and 2 children stepped out in their nightgown, and they said, "Papa, what's happening?" And the sorcerer threw a firebolt at the kid. Which did 3 damage and the kid had 2 hit points, so it didn't insta-kill it, at least. But that kind of froze the spectacle. Then because the garden was on fire, the guards came, and the conflict got bigger and bigger, and they failed. That's what I wanted to say. Because this session was all about infiltration and that kind of thing, and the only thing I needed to prepare is to know what the motivations were of these characters in this house, who were in the house. 2 children were asleep because they couldn't participate in the party because they were way too young. Oh, by the way, these were all Black Dragonborn. Not that it really matters, but well, it does matter for the continuation of who the Master of Coins is actually. But anyway. When they fired a firebolt at their kids, the sorcerer got the party sorcerer got dragged down the stairs while the guards were arresting everybody else. Some of them, they all came together, and they all got sent to jail, except for the sorcerer, who got tortured in the cellar, because you don't kill somebody else's kid, especially not from the evil bad guys, so to say. Yeah, they were evil. So that's how you resolve it. But the only thing you need, you don't even need these kinds of maps, that's way too much. But it's so cool to do it once in a while. So this is not an obligatory map. It's a map to show off your Dungeon Master skill, because it's way cool to do, and you don't have much else to prepare for, because you already did everything in the previous session where you decided who everybody was. Although what I did do is think of the guards on the balconies, how strong they would be. So that's the thing that I did do as extra preparation. But I didn't actually prep much more for the. I knew that they might go talk to other guests, but I just would say this is Hank, this is Julia, Julia is also the leader of the city. This is Margot or whatever. Oh, I'm getting into the magicians' names, and that's enough for letting the party live. And when the tree went on fire, they all went that way. You know, it's all kind of logic when you're trying to do that kind of stuff. Of course, I had thought that they would succeed, but alas, they didn't. So I had to come up with a result that would take that into consideration. They threw a firebolt at the kid. They tried to kidnap a person in his own home during a party. They tried to enter through the balconies. They set his garden on fire. These good aligned, part of them are good aligned characters, messed up big time. And they went to jail. And so that's what I had to prepare for the next session. And this is where what I'm trying to say right now is that in order to prepare for a city adventure, you can really compartmentalize everything you're doing. You don't have to develop the whole city. You just have to think of what's the logical next step that they are going to take. And that takes enough. Of course, they can always take a sharp left and do something entirely different. For example, they could have just said, just before they entered the heist, oh man, we shouldn't do this. Let's just go back. Let's warn the guards. And then you have to think of something that would happen in the jail. But you don't need the jail or the guard station. You don't need the guard station to all planned out to have every to how do I say this, to fulfill their needs, so to say. The only thing you have to know about the guard station is that part of them are corrupt. You have to write down a name once again, and then you have all you need of the guards and probably an idea of how strong a guard is. You can take that from the monster manual. If you want to have it custom, then you can build a 3rd level fighter or 5th level or 2nd level fighter, whatever you want, with a champion specialization or no specialization at all. Or you can just, as I described in I think the first and the second episode of this series, come up with some statistics in a logical sense, and which is really easy in 5th edition, and there you have your guards. So if they had done that at this point, I would just have made up the guard post. Say there's this big room in the start. There are these offices. There you see some guards walking around, and they're talking to each other about what happened last night and everything. And that's enough for that to divert the session towards that point. And then you would have had the corruption thing spread. If they would have informed these guards about the Master of Coins, you could even randomly roll if they would meet a corrupt guard or not, and that would send it in two different directions again. But the only thing you have to keep in mind that some of them were corrupt, and so they would go and talk to the Master of or the emissaries of the Master of Coins, so the Black Cloaks, and that would develop another kind of story, another kind of confrontation. Maybe they would do it in would let them out of the building and say, meet me in this alley, and then they would be set upon by the Black Cloak family and their guards or something. That could have been the way that had ended. But instead, it ended with them in jail. And they didn't resist anymore because they were hurt because of the battle that had happened. And they didn't know what to do, and so they ended in jail. And I told them they were going to be executed. That was the end of the session. So now they had something to prep, a way to escape. And I had something to prep because I don't like to just insta-kill my characters and have to think of ways that they could escape or who might help them and that kind of stuff. And so the next session, I'm going over it quite quickly now. I did a skill challenge through the city where they had to run. Of course, they first had to escape, and they did that by getting the help of the Johanna Silverschijn, who was the help of the big bad evil guy who didn't want them in jail. So she helped with some magics, and they escaped to a house that she pointed out, and they ran through the city, chased by guards, and they had them do all kinds of skill checks, and they really liked what was happening. Meanwhile, the sorcerer was being tortured in the room below. He missed some of his fingers, he missed an eye, because that's what they do when you threaten their children. And those two storylines had to come together in a house, and in that house there was an escape to an underground city, which is a thing that I will be discussing next session. But for inspiration, it will be about this next session. Do you hear me say next session? Next Jasper's lab. Boom, boom, boom. It's this one. It's a minimal map. It's some city streets. It's a crevice, but there's a whole lot of lore behind this, which is very important and which I want to talk to you about next episode of Jasper's Laboratory. So at the bottom of all this, how to pace development. I wanted to get back to that for a small while. As you might have noticed, I had 3 sessions in this city. And I had 3 sessions in the city because I didn't do more than I needed to do. Later on in the series, I will also be discussing what happens when they came back the second time. Because then then they had a lot more knowledge about the world and what was happening, and they suddenly got to meet all these people, and things got really complicated. But that's the next step, the level up of city adventuring, so to say. But what I want you to get out of this Jasper's Laboratory is that you prepare for the goals they set themselves. You prepare some things that they love, and you prepare what their friends have been up to in the meantime. Oh, by the way, they did get to know what happened to Carrick because of the lady that also came to the house at the end, who was the friend of the sorcerer. Complicated story, but she told him that he had died, or it was the innkeeper. Man, I can't remember. It doesn't really matter. They did get to know that, so that was that set them on a path. Well, so what the thing players always do is that they connect it to everything to the thing that they're currently handling. So they thought about that the Master of Coins must have killed him for some reason. There was no connection between them two, but because that was the adventure, they thought of that. And it made them sad. So that's how I introduced that NPC to them again. But it also increased the level of threat, so to say, because they didn't know what they could expect. So I did 3 sessions. One was... actually, I did kind of 4, but the 4th was also... something else happened there as well. That's what I will be discussing the next time. The first session was them exploring allies and possible leads towards who the Master of Coins was. They drew the wrong conclusions, but they made friends along the way and got more sense about the city. The second session was about exploring their options about what to do about these Master of Coins emissaries. And the first session was the battle and the further extension of the preparations and the party, so to say, and going to jail, and that was enough to fill an evening. That's how I paced the adventure, And so it might have looked like the players have all the control in this situation because they decide what to do, but this is not true. Because you always narrow down their field to the thing that you know, except when they go totally take a sharp left or a right turn, then you have to improvise what's happening on the outsides of everything. But I knew that they would meet the Retters, possibly meet the Retters. I also included the in-depth rogue and made Vindal the rogue from the party and counter her in when he was investigating options and stuff. I have not discussed everything that they did in that time, but this is the kind of the main storyline I did. And I'm totally in control of what's happening. And I only stretch a session when it's cool to do it because you add flavor to a certain part of the adventure, like the Otayuk in the sewers and the trope of being in the sewers and battling something there. And I have total control about the house that they will be entering, if it's to assassinate them, if it's to burgle the master, the supposed master of coins, or to be at a party in that certain house. I have all the control, and in the heist thing, I also have all the control. And of course, I let them do the thing they want to do, and I give them all the options to be successful. But I can also make them feel at certain aspects that make things more difficult or easier. And I think that in this case, they actually failed themselves most, because after attacking the child, which was of course something that I had planned as a kind of confrontation to make these people real people in the city, there was really no turning back from a confrontation with the guard. Otherwise, they might have had an argument and it might have gone in a different direction, but that sealed the deal for them. And they were, by then, they went to jail. And even though they were corrupt cops, they couldn't show their face in the city anymore. So the next thing is escape from the city. Oh no, let me finish the pacing first. Oh, that's another thing I'm already spoiling. Let's put this map in front. So the pacing is all done by me, in a sense, although I wouldn't have minded that it would last 4 or 5 sessions more, but after session 3 there was no turning back to that storyline in the city, so I had to start developing something else. But I was in control the whole time, and they had the sense of freedom at the same time. And that's true, because they are free to do whatever they want, but players are pretty predictable as well. I didn't overextend my time as a dungeon master, but I did add those maps in the end just to spice it up a bit. I also made a map of the jail, by the way, which was a very simple map that had no relevance in the end, but made them feel like they were really in jail. So that's what I want you to get out of this. I hope it was quite informative. Next time we'll be doing the escape from Dramoor. And in that escape, I included some things that I wanted to happen to them. And for example, they went to the underground city, but they didn't only get there because it was the logical escape. It was also because I wanted to show them something that would become relevant later. And had some cool opportunities to put in some monsters and have them experience some other kind of things involving mushrooms, for example. So we'll be talking about that escape and how you can prepare a very easy, something that would be a very easy thing, like getting out of a tunnel to the outside and make it part of an adventure. And I hope you will like what you see next time. If there are no more questions, are there more questions? Are there more questions? Oh. Nope. Okay. Then either I was I dumbfounded you, or I explained it pretty well. Is that a word? I never understood how you would pronounce that. Enjoyed it very much. Well, thank you. So let's go to the outro then. Thanks for watching. Next week it's parallel projections with Vampire the Masquerade with Eric, Michel, Shanks, DM Shanks, and Lady Q from Top Down Tabletop, and our favorite Brit Ashley, who will be doing that adventure at 8:30 Central European Time. The day after it is Talking Void with Jin as my guest, and the question is, what was the rule that either broke or your game or made it great in some manner? And then the week after that is the next Precipice of Dreams episode. And if you really want to join us, this is a very good time to join us, because we are starting a new story arc. It's part of the same adventure, but it's really kind of a new beginning, and I think it works pretty well as a new start for the adventure. So thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Jasper's Lab on Twitch or on YouTube, and see you soonish. Goodbye.